O'Connor, thank you for agreeing to participate in our series of 2022 co-production of CIB UK Facts for EU video interviews about Brexit, independence, sovereignty, personal freedoms, and anything else you want to talk about. It's an absolute pleasure to see you. You've gone viral here in the UK with your latest speech in the New Zealand Parliament, and thank you for giving up your time to us today.
Lee, it's a pleasure to join you and your audience from down here in the colonies. No, only kidding. No, it's an absolute delight. So thanks for the chance to come on, talk and engage. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Okay,
excellent. So for the benefit of our audience who over here may not know you, Simon, you're a member of the New Zealand National Party. You've been a member of the New Zealand Parliament for the past 11 years, representing Tamaki. You are also a member of your Parliament's Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Committee and the immediate past chairman of that. So that is of great interest to our audience, and we'll hopefully touch on that in a little while. You're also a former chairman and a current board member, I believe, of an organisation over there called Monarchy New Zealand, which is an organisation in favour of retaining New Zealand's status as a constitutional monarchy. And that's something clearly that resonates over here in the year of Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. So
that's great intel. You've got great intel on me.
Hey, we do our research, Simon. So I thought, why not kick off with Her Majesty? And can I start by asking you, what are your personal views about Her Majesty the Queen? What do you think are the views of the majority of New Zealanders about the monarchy and where it fits into the whole constitutional framework?
Oh, very happy to start that in that space, Lee, but of course I'm happy Platinum Jubilee to Her Majesty. We think of her as the Queen of New Zealand here. We do acknowledge that she's the Queen of the United Kingdom as well in 14 other realms. But no, I think she's a remarkable woman. I've spoken in the Parliament and in public quite frequently about just her life of service. And also, it may be lost occasionally on people. Of course, she's a woman of enormous impact, and to stress that term woman, you know, in an often still male-dominated world, here is this remarkable woman who's given over 70 years, well, 70 of course in the role of Queen, but over 70 years of service to the Commonwealth. And she's been a remarkable Queen to this country, 10 visits over those years, and New Zealanders follow her with great interest, and I will say with a little concern at the moment, of course, with her declining health. One would expect that at her age, but just remarkable to still see her out and about. So yeah, personally, I think she's incredible, and hopefully without overdoing my answer, a big part of it too is I'm just a great believer in constitutional monarchy as the best way to form a democracy. So it's a bit of a split, if you will, between the royalist side. I don't have pictures of the royal family, you know, Kate and William and those plastered in my office per se, remarkable as they too are, but it's that constitutional system which she represents. So yeah, I think it's she's pretty cool. Let's put it in New Zealand parlance.
What do you think the majority of Kiwis feel about the monarchy now? Because we've seen all these stories about you changing your flag and all that kind of stuff. What do you think the majority of your fellow countrymen and women feel about constitutional monarchy?
I think if we held a referendum tomorrow, which fortunately we're not, but if we held one tomorrow, the majority would support Her Majesty and would want to retain a constitutional monarchy here. If I was to quickly tease that out a little bit, I think you find most New Zealanders, like the vast majority, would support Elizabeth as Queen. I think even the most grumpiest Republican would have to acknowledge she's done a remarkable job. But when we have poll after poll here in New Zealand, usually funded by the other side, bless them, it's very clear that New Zealanders still support a constitutional monarchy, and I see that continuing, particularly when we do, sadly, but understandably, see a change. I think a lot of Republicans think at that moment, New Zealanders and others around the world will say, okay, we don't want a new king, but actually I think what New Zealanders will see is a smooth, peaceful transfer of power, and then all the ceremony and the pomp and all of the stuff we still love. So actually, I think we'll see it be retained down here for a long time, and that's good for our democracy, by the way. Much better for our democracy.
And you're an MP, so you don't feel it impinges on your ability to run New Zealand democratically as you are?
Yeah, well, no. I mean, first and foremost, might seem odd coming from a politician. We don't need more of us. And if we move to a Republican model, we're going to have another politician at the top with all the issues and partisanship that comes with that. The other is she has no impact in a negative way on my day-to-day. I mean, every day I'm reminded by my oath to her that I'm here to try and represent all New Zealanders through the Crown. But fundamentally too, and I try to say this to Kiwis I talk to around the monarchy, is fundamentally her biggest power is to call elections. And what a remarkable power that is. It's simple, and of course there's much more to what she does, but fundamentally as our head of state, an apolitical person who just can tell us when we have to go back to elections. And I think that's tremendous.
Yeah. Okay, let's move away from New Zealand for a moment, if we may. Let's talk about something pretty close to the hearts of a lot of our audience, and that's something called Brexit. So you're a member of your Parliament's Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. So given that, can you just give us your views quickly on Brexit? First of all, are you pro or anti?
Look, I knew you were going to ask that, and I can't give you a definitive answer. And look, that's not me just being simply political. I follow the debate really closely. It was raging when I was the chair of Foreign Affairs. We had your High Commissioner and others in giving us excellent briefings, and obviously followed through particularly friends and contacts in the UK. I'm genuinely torn. I'm genuinely torn. I can appreciate at one level the desire to have your sovereignty. Why should Brussels be telling you, how straight your bananas should be or not, or whatever, the suction power of your vacuum cleaners? I mean, it's, to a Kiwi, to me, that would be just frustrating. But there's another part of me as well, Lee, that goes, well, I can see cooperation is better than not, that actually working with a greater number of countries is a good thing. And New Zealand has got in the trade space, is pushing for more multilateral agreements. So I'm actually quite genuinely torn, and I suppose fundamentally then I've sort of, if you will, kept a step back, didn't get involved one way or another. But I suppose the outcome ultimately is that the country voted for it, and now we support it. In other words, how does New Zealand work with the UK post-Brexit?
Okay. And in terms of that trade deal that is negotiating at the moment, how do you see that? Because you're one of the key players in that, and what do you see as the opportunities going forward for both New Zealand and the United Kingdom if we cooperate bilaterally on a deal?
Well, it looks like the deal's pretty much done, which is great, and I'm thrilled. New Zealand's thrilled. There's been no resistance down here. In fact, I think in the next couple of days we introduce the domestic legislation we require to bring that about. So look, I think it's a fantastic first step. You'll get to have even better access to incredible New Zealand products, and in particular for New Zealand, we're going to appreciate a lot of the services that you guys have. So we're probably not going to import a lot of material. We will, of course, for some, but your financial services, your cybersecurity services, all of the technical side, New Zealand will absolutely welcome that. But I'd say it's only a first step. I sit on a side that wants to see even deeper and greater cooperation between our nations. And just one example would be, I'd love that people from the UK can travel here in effect without visas, sort of almost an open border. And that may be controversial as you're dealing with the EU and so forth, but I'd like that New Zealanders could travel out to the UK.
I don't think you get an argument actually in the UK about that.
I am pleased to hear that. It's something I keep raising. And look, the other is we want to cooperate more, particularly down here in the Pacific. I know the UK is interested in joining what's called the CPTPP, a Trans-Pacific Partnership. We'd love to have that because trade's important, but also trade cooperation leads to much more cooperation, particularly into the security space. We've got our issues down here in the Pacific with China. You've obviously got issues with Russia. How do we cooperate more fully?
Well, then you've brilliantly segued, Simon, into my next question, which is about defence. I wanted to ask you how you see the cooperation between our countries on defence, because there's a lot going on at the moment. You rightly pointed out Russia, but there's also the Chinese perspective as well. There's the South China Sea. That is something that is not quite in your backyard, but almost in your backyard. And we've sent one of our new aircraft carriers down there very recently. So what can you tell us about how you see defence cooperation between New Zealand and the United Kingdom going forward?
Well, the short answer, we have a really good relationship, but it could be better. And I'd say it's probably more from the New Zealand side. As I say, our military is modelled off yours. There's long-standing, again, good personal ties, good existing cooperation. So don't want any of your listeners to think otherwise. But it would be good. New Zealand ultimately needs more capabilities and better interoperability with our allies. So it was fantastic that you had the new aircraft carrier down here. We'd love to have seen it, by the way. I have said to various colleagues or friends of mine in Westminster that next time send it a bit further south.
Speak to Tom Tugendhat.
Yes, I'll lobby him. I'll lobby him. But jokes aside, it would be great that New Zealand might have better, let's say, maritime capabilities, that we could join you in those freedom of navigation operations into the South China Sea, or more recently, you've seen China in effect lay claim to the Taiwan Straits. Well, actually, we need to exert international law there. New Zealand's sent at the moment some people, particularly in the intelligence space, up into Europe to support what's happening in Ukraine. We've channeled a lot of our funding through the UK, which is great. But again, more capabilities, more interoperability would be welcome. But again, I want to stress that's primarily needed from the New Zealand side. In other words, this Parliament, the New Zealand Parliament, needs to vote more money into vote defence to enable this to happen.
Okay. And you saw, obviously, the AUKUS deal, Australia, United Kingdom and United States deal, which seriously upset our French friends, of course. Yeah. Just briefly, any comment on that?
Look, in itself, a great deal. I can absolutely understand why the three nations have engaged, and actually I was pleased to see it, but disappointed that New Zealand wasn't part of it. But I can understand why, partly because of my earlier comments about where New Zealand's capabilities are. And I think at times, Lee, there's a judgment from some of our traditional allies of just how New Zealand's navigating that relationship with, say, China and the likes of the UK or the US. So I'd like New Zealand to have been part of AUKUS, to stress, not because we want nuclear submarines, again, repeat, not, we don't need nuclear, we're very proud being nuclear free, but there's a lot of cyber and intelligence aspects to it, which New Zealand could benefit from. So let's hope, from my point of view, that over the coming years, New Zealand might be able to become part of AUKUS in some way.
Yeah, I mean, just to be absolutely clear, the submarines in question are only nuclear powered. They're not nuclear enabled in terms of weaponry. But the benefit of our audience, New Zealand is very anti-nuclear. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. So New
I mean,
Zealand
you won't have any nuclear-powered UK craft entering any port in New Zealand.
No, New Zealand, when we talk nuclear free, not only weapon systems, but also propulsion. So the old days where be it UK or certainly the US would come with it, we won't confirm nor deny what's propelling the vessel. We'd say, well, you can't come in. And that's a big part of something we're proud of in New Zealand. But as I say, AUKUS has got so much more to it than any nuclear propulsion component, and it would be great for us to be part of that.
Yeah, okay. That's very interesting. I want to come on to another topic, which is bothering a lot of people in the United Kingdom at the moment. And I think it's something that you've got some views about, and that's the education of our young people, both in schools and universities. And I referred briefly to your viral video of your speech in the New Zealand Parliament, which was kind of electric. I'd love for our audience to hear what you have to say about education, about activist academics, which I think was the term that you used, in universities. Are they indoctrinating our young people? And if they are, then what can we do about it?
Yeah, look, I do have serious concerns about aspects of academia, in inverted commas, here in New Zealand. I mean, again, it probably goes without saying, but I better say it. You know, there are some amazing academics in New Zealand doing some amazing research. But in a lot of areas, they are just activists. They might have the title doctor or professor, but they're pushing only a point of view, their point of view. And even worse, they're not allowing alternatives to be discussed. And so once you move into the more controversial issues, so around sexuality or gender, critical race theory, any of these life issues, all the big ethical issues are becoming very fraught to be discussed on universities, or, you know, what by their nature should be areas of debate, dissent, challenge, argument. And so in recent weeks and months in New Zealand, like a women's rights groups, so they have a very clear sense of what a woman is versus those who have a more transgender view of things, for example, they were effectively banned from talking at the university. We have ongoing discussions, Lee, in this country about the relationship of the Crown, the New Zealand Crown, to the Indigenous people. Well, those who have, let's say, an alternative view are being again banned from speaking at universities. There was something only a few days ago, again, unfortunately, to use the transgender example, where it was explicit in the exam paper you were not to say anything against the topic. You could only write in support of it. And so these are only some quick examples, but it's a clear sign of activism and not actually allowing that free speech and thought.
And, you know, this leads on, really, doesn't it, into personal freedoms, which is something that I believe you also have opinions about generally, on this whole wokery, cancel culture, freedom of beliefs, be they religious or other. Simon, the floor is yours. Let rip. Go on.
Oh, look, it's a big problem across particularly the Western world. I mean, it's fascinating to actually compare it to the more francophone and other European traditions, actually, which are going in a very different direction. But the English-speaking Western world seems to have lost its head, and some of the most basic personal liberties are being tossed out the window, including freedom of speech, the ability to articulate what you believe. Instead, you're being, well, you've touched on it, you're being cancelled, you're being pilloried, you get mobbed by the Twitterati or media, slammed and shut down. And I think it's a really sad but also dangerous thing. I might elaborate on that briefly.
What do we do about it, Simon?
Well, look, first and foremost, I think we just got to keep speaking. It probably takes some of us just to keep going, sort of be the umbrella, for want of a better term, to try and protect others. I always get the quote wrong. I think it's from, oh my Lord, it's the old evangelist, Graham. Long and short, the strength of one gives, well, the backbone of one gives strength to others. So we need some thought leaders and speech leaders out there who are just unambiguous and not afraid to speak out. And to be honest with you, Lee, take the hits, but because I think in turn that will encourage others. But even for those who are, if you will, still uncertain, don't be afraid to speak your thoughts to family and friends.
Can I ask a supplementary?
Please.
The National Party there, how do you feel that your colleagues are standing up against this, and could they do more?
Oh, so the National Party is a traditional centre-right party, actually quite a broad church between sort of the traditional liberal to conservative, very much for free speech. So we've had some attempted legislation recently, which, excuse me, my party supported, which was to, in effect, enshrine free speech into universities. That was voted down. That was rejected by the government of the day, sadly. So yeah, my party is very much supportive of free speech. Now, there's always limits. No one doesn't shout fire in a cinema, but the ability to speak, to say what you want, even if it's stupid, is okay. That's how democracies are founded. And I think it's why there's growing alarm in a lot of Western countries of the censorship that's in place, that you can only have a monological view on things and you go, gosh, that ain't democracy anymore.
No, I think your views probably are going to resonate just as much in the United Kingdom as, and frankly in other parts of Europe, as they do in New Zealand. And you've certainly articulated them very strongly in a typical Kiwi way, which we appreciate. So again, you've nicely moved us on to my next topic, which is your Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. And we've kind of gazed on in some amazement on what's happened in New Zealand with what some people have described as the most authoritarian reaction to the COVID pandemic that there has been, almost more authoritarian than countries like China and North Korea. So I can't let you go without asking about your views on all of that, because you're now, I believe your borders are now open, is that right? Finally, after about 2 years?
The borders are open, but and so please come and visit. We'd love to have people back, but you know, as we record, people still have to do a COVID test on arrival. We still have to wear masks on public transport, for example. We're still having to wear masks here in the New Zealand Parliament when I'm in the chamber. Maybe because we all look ugly, I don't know. But no, there's still restrictions in play. So, but I want to stress, welcome back to New Zealand. The borders are open. But look, put it this way: 2 years ago, I would not have wanted to be in the PM's shoes as she made the call to shut the country down. And like a lot of world leaders, trying to understand exactly what was happening and where things would go. So I'd say early on, most New Zealanders, myself included, accepted the various rules and even to a degree the limitations on our freedoms. But as of today, I certainly sit on a side that says, well, I don't know why we need still various rules and regulations. In fact, a lot of the controls, we still had people being quarantined in hotels for 7 to 10 to 14 days, only a few months back. You know, the freedom of movement and association curtailed. So long and short, New Zealand should have lifted most of, if not all of its restrictions months ago, in my opinion.
And just for the benefit of the UK audience, people thinking about travelling to New Zealand, which many Brits love to do, they're welcome. They won't be stopped anymore. They're welcome in your country, but they will have to still wear masks on public transport and things like that. Is that right? Yeah.
So if things keep changing here, but if I've got it right, firstly, welcome. But you have to be double vaccinated. Okay. You're asked to do a RAT test, so those rapid antigen tests on arrival, sort of an honesty system. And as I say, if you arrive here, you'll find people are still wearing masks in the likes of buses and trains and so forth. So there's still various rules in play, a lot fewer than we had months ago. We still had to do vaccine passes and limitations of how many people in rooms. All of that is gone. But yeah, people are welcome, but there are still some restrictions, such as being double vaccinated, in play.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fine. I'd like to move on to another topic, which I think you have some interest in, which is China. And you are, I believe, co-chair of what's called the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, IPAC. Mm-hmm. So you have that in common with Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, for example, who's been banned by the Chinese Communist Party. I'd like to know, therefore, what are your views on China? This is not a huge topic in the UK at the moment, but it's becoming so. So what do you think about its intentions in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Straits? What about its trade practices? And what about its human rights record?
I'll try to do it justice. So yeah, I'm one of the global co-chairs of IPAC, along with Sir Ian, and I keep connections with the likes of your China Research Group there, as well, a separate group within the UK. So IPAC fundamentally wants democracies to look afresh about how China is run. So to make the really quick distinction, China and Chinese people, wonderful. The Chinese Communist Party, I have no time for. I've got no time for communists. As simple as that, really. And the first victims of the CCP are its own people. And then that's beginning to flow out. And one only needs to look at what happened to the once flourishing democracy of Hong Kong, which is now being crushed. So, I mean, China ultimately wants to be able to dictate its own terms. I think it obviously has its view of its territorial expanse, which is why they continue to claim Taiwan and what's happened recently with the Taiwan Straits and into the South China Sea. But I would stress to your listeners, in my opinion, there is a limit to that. There's never been a history out of China to expand beyond what it believes is its territorial space. But what it does want, Lee, is to operate in the globe on its terms. And the global order that you and I here in New Zealand and the UK are used to is not advantageous to China. And so they are trying, as they, well, not so much infiltrate, but extend their influence in different countries, that those countries will vote with them in the likes of the UN, or more recent, the World Health Assembly and so forth. So they are very, very keen, very, very keen. And they often focus on the smaller countries, which is why they've been in the Pacific recently, in effect trying to buy off Pacific Island nations. So that's a concern to us, because ultimately we won't have free trade. If China gets its way, there won't be free trade. And then finally, you asked about human rights. Their record is appalling. And I personally believe we need to keep calling that out, as I say, crushing the democracy in Hong Kong, arresting such notable figures as Cardinal Zen, you know, good Lord. Right through, of course, to 1 million+ Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps. I mean, it's just, excuse the parlance, bloody awful. And the world needs to keep calling it out.
Okay, yeah. Do you think the world's doing enough at the moment on China? It's being discussed as we speak, of course, in Madrid at the summit, the NATO summit that is going on there. And I think, isn't one of your ministers actually attending for the first time ever the NATO summit in Madrid, along with Australia, South Korea, and 1 or 2 other countries?
Yeah, in fact, actually, our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has gone up, which is, for us, the first time. So let's hope that is positive. Partisan politics aside, I hope, and I suspect she will, do New Zealand proud and add our voice in. So to your question, is the world doing enough? No. There's good things happening. Don't get me wrong. It's good that countries are talking about China, but more could be done and more cooperation could be done. So In other words, instead of having little countries, look, Lithuania is not little, but they're feeling quite the brunt of Chinese assertion at the moment. Australia's experienced it. Imagine what the world would look like if more countries reacted in unison to say, no, this is not acceptable. So that's what I'd like to see more of.
Okay. And in fairness to the EU, they have come out in support of Lithuania, which is suffering under Chinese sanctions. But again, I think a lot of people would like to see a much stronger message going to President Xi, because a little bit like Russia, we're looking at two grand authoritarian empires that are run by effectively dictators. And so your point about the difference between the Chinese people and the Chinese Communist Party, I think applies equally to the people of Russia. Would you agree with that?
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, it's easy for us in an everyday conversation just to talk about Russia and China. As I said earlier, they're the first victims of a totalitarian leadership. Let's say Xi in China, Putin in Russia. So, people like myself, Sir Ian and others raise our voices through the likes of IPAC to try and bring about change in those countries as well. It's not just about their influence in, say, New Zealand, the UK, Canada, Australia. It's also about what's happening in those home countries where we see fundamental human rights being undermined. And if I might, that's why people like myself work with Bill Browder around Magnitsky legislation. New Zealand does not have those types of laws. New Zealand doesn't have modern slavery legislation. So I have a bill in the parliamentary ballot here. So the more of that in more countries, the better. Yeah.
Have you been banned by China yet?
No, I haven't.
Shame on you.
A number of your, I'm sure I'm close. So I've been sanctioned by Russia, but then the whole New Zealand Parliament has. But no, China hasn't sanctioned me yet. I think New Zealand remains still small fry, but I believe a number of my UK and American colleagues have been.
Indeed, they have. Sir Duncan-Smith is one good example. But your parliament's all been sanctioned by Putin's Russia, has it?
Yes, we were all named to a man and a woman. So yes, we've all been sanctioned, and I mean, I'm grinning at one level. You can wear them as a badge of honor, but I'm also realizing, well, you can also realize that sanctions can have a real bite. And I better be clear, I haven't felt it with the Russian ones, but sanctions in any way are not to be completely laughed off.
Okay. Any other topics that we've got just a little bit of time left? Is there anything on your mind that you want to get off your chest? And this is a free speech conversation, so it can be anything you choose, and we can still publish it.
I think it is still in the free speech space, actually. It's just to encourage people, particularly our young ones, to speak your mind, to share your views. For me personally, I hold pretty strong views on a number of issues, but the thing I most enjoy is actually having a rational discussion with people from the other side with completely opposite views. And it's what fundamentally drives our societies forward and grows them. So many people run down that line, and I think we don't let them, actually. The time for sort of an emotional blackmail has to end, to go, no, come back here, and we're going to keep debating. In fact, I want to provide you, if anything, a safe space for you to provide me a coherent, rational argument. That's the only safe space that should be, if you will, allowed. A place where you can safely but rightly put your opinion forward, not run away and hide. So that's our challenge in our Western democracies, if we truly value a functioning democratic system.
Okay, and just finally, the All Blacks, can you please keep them over there, because we're fed up of them beating us?
Well, we could try to arrange that as part of the deal. I mean, I think from time to time you'd have to keep your cricket team away from us in reverse. But yeah, we'll see what we can do.
It's been a pleasure, and I want to thank you very much for your time. I I appreciate it enormously, and I'm sure our audience does too.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to join you, Lee, and talk, and maybe to chat again. But yeah, farewell from the New Zealand Parliament.